I'm an analyst that covers the broad range of spectrum of research in the market for governance, risk management, and compliance, and what keeps organizations up at night and how they solve those problems with the right technology. Joining me today, we're going to have David Diamond, who's a former chief audit executive who's been down in the trenches, working and managing an internal audit program, as well as Ravi, who's the founder and CEO of Audit Prodigy. The three of us will bring together, our thoughts on back to basics, internal audit success in 2020 and beyond. So I'm going to start off with some of my insight. First off, I think it's important to understand, what the organization's up against. I recently wrote a paper called Navigating Chaos that was published in Enterprise Risk Magazine by the Institute of Risk Management in London. Today's organization is a mess. It's a maze. It's a chaotic maze of different transactions and processes and relationships. Today's organization is very dynamic. It's changing minute by minute, second by second. Employees are changing, regulations and risks are changing, technology shifting and changing. There's mergers and acquisitions. So much of the organization's outsourced, and we have this complex web of suppliers, vendors, outsourcers, service providers, contractors, consultants, temporary workers, that you can't even define where the organization starts and stops anymore. Today's organization isn't about brick and mortar business. It's levels of gray. It's not black and white. That third party, that outsourcer or that, temporary worker, they have access to your systems and processes, and their issues are your issues. And you've got to be able to be aware of that and manage that in the environment. And so it means being able to see the big picture in the interconnectedness. It's navigating chaos in the organization. I often leverage and reference, the Titanic as an example here. The Captain E.J. Smith of the Titanic said, "Never in all history have we harnessed such formidable technology. Every scientific advancement known to man has been incorporated into its design. The operational controls are sound and foolproof." Yet, the Titanic sank on its maiden voyage. Yet overconfidence in the ship's design. How often are we overconfident in our business? You had to push to get across the Atlantic quickly to show its speed and power of the day. How often are we pushing business faster than we can control it? And assess and verify the controls of the business. You had external environmental risks that in 1912, there's already some period of climate change and the northern Arctic ice shelf was breaking up. Not only that, the tidal moon poles of January, February, March 1912 were of a significant nature, bringing more hazards of icebergs into shipping lanes than were normally there. And there wasn't a proper number of life preservers and lifeboats on the Titanic for the number of passengers on board. They tell us the size of rudder and propeller were undersized for the size of the ship. The iron ore used in the rivets was of a brittle and inferior quality. It goes on and on where they're getting, warnings, telegraphs from other ships in the area saying, warnings, icebergs are in the area. And one of the responses back from the Titanic was, "Shut up, we're tired of hearing about it." Can you imagine that? GDPR, CCPA, shut up, we're tired of hearing about it. There's many things that went wrong with the Titanic, but the Titanic is just an illustration of modern business today. All those little things that I may reference on the Titanic, and there were many more I don't even have time to go to in this webinar, all contributed to the disaster of the Titanic. Today's audit department needs to provide assurance across the business, not just assurance on overall internal controls over financial reporting and SOX type things, but on operational audits. Environmental audits, health and safety audits, and there's a quality audits and third-party audits and assessments. Today's audit department is trying to navigate chaos and see the intricate relationship of controls and risks throughout the business and be able to provide assurance to the board of directors and other stakeholders that the business is properly navigating chaos. That's the challenge before us, is navigating chaos. The physicist Fritjof Capra said, "The more we study the major problems of our time, the more we come to realize that they cannot be understood in isolation. They are systemic problems, which means that they are interconnected and interdependent." What the physicist Capra is saying here, he was referring to biological ecosystems and the interdependency of biological ecosystems. But it applies so well to business today. That quality issue, that environmental or health and safety issue, that IT security issue, all these can contribute to something going wrong with the business. And they're interrelated and interconnected. And we need to be able to see this interconnectedness of risks and controls across the business to be able to navigate and manage things in the business. Leonardo da Vinci stated, realize that everything connects to everything else. It's that chaos of risk and control interconnectedness that audit's trying to provide assurance on. Where we have things like chaos theory, where the flutter of a butterfly's wings in the Netherlands makes tiny atmospheric changes that can influence the development path of a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. Who knows? Hurricane Dorian several weeks ago could have started with the flutter of a butterfly's wings in Amsterdam. But that's what matters. Those little things matter. You take something like the JP Morgan whale incident, multiple billion-dollar loss on JP Morgan, and you read the report, and one of the significant contributing factors was a spreadsheet error. The little things matter, and it's the role of audit to provide assurance, the top-down and bottoms-up assurance in the organization that risks and controls are being properly addressed and managed in the organization. Audit's there to provide assurance in this dynamic environment where the little interconnected things matter that could grow to be significant disasters for the organization. And that's what we have to keep on top of. But the greatest challenge that audit is under is trying to manage all the change in the environment. We got volumes and volumes of legal and regulatory change, changing laws, rules, regulations, and enforcement actions, from bribery and corruption to fraud to money laundering, to harassment, to discrimination, to all these things that impact the organization. That it could lead to providing assurance in HR audits, quality audits, environmental audits, as well as audits of traditional audits of financial reporting and IT audits. One industry like financial services, a global bank is dealing with 220 regulatory change events coming from over 900 regulators every business day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Each day, 220 regulatory change events are happening around the world, impacting global financial services organizations. That's just one aspect in one industry. Lots of legal and regulatory change that audit's got to keep up on and provide assurance that the organization's crossing its T's and dotting its I's correctly when it comes to compliance in a dynamic regulatory environment. We got shifting external risks, changing market forces and geopolitical risks and economic conditions, shifts in technology. 15 years ago, we were concerned about, social media and how do we use that for business purposes, and how do we manage the risk of LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter when individuals and employees are using those for business purposes. 5-6 years ago, audit was concerned about things like bring your own device policies. And how do we address the proliferation of personal devices being used for business purposes like tablets and smartphones. Today, audit should be concerned about Internet of Things, where the microwave in the break room could lead to our next data breach and compromise the employee or client data, resulting in GDPR and CCPA violations across the organization. Literally the Internet of Things, everything being connected. And it gets even worse than that. Audit's got to provide assurance, with third-party relationships. It's not just the microwave in the break room, but it could be the blender at that home office of that contractor that's got your data on their laptop, that personal data of individuals, whether employees or clients, that if compromised could lead to a significant GDPR violation. And their blender that's connected to the internet could be the doorway into compromise that data. That's the type of dynamic navigating chaos environment that audit's got to be agile and stay on top of. I'm not joking. My wife and I, went to the Wisconsin State Fair. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we upgraded our Vitamix blender in August. Our blender is connected. I can program it with my smartphone and have different settings. If there's a security vulnerability on my blender, that could potentially compromise my client data on my laptop, leading to a GDPR exposure and things. How does audit provide assurance? We need agile approaches to audit to not only manage and provide assurance in audits in traditional business boundaries, but across business boundaries. But the business itself is constantly changing. Strategy, processes, technology, employees, Jane that just moved from sales into accounting. Is she fully aware of the controls and things that are in place in the accounts receivable process she's managing? Because she just shifted roles. As employees, in the accounting department, shift roles over 20 years from accounts receivable to accounts payable to procurement. They have huge inherited rights issues, and they've got, godlike, access to IT systems and accounting systems and things, and can do a lot of damage, whether it's malicious or inadvertent. And you got third-party relationships. And as much as our business is changing, their businesses are changing. They might have been the right business to do right organization to do business with 3 years ago, but are they the right one today? And then mergers and acquisitions bring in completely redundant sets of policies and controls and procedures in the environment, and we have to, an audit's got to be able to harmonize and be able to approach mergers and acquisitions. And the greatest challenge is trying to keep all this change in sync. With regulatory change, risk change, and business change, how does audit navigate all this chaos and become agile in providing audits in a dynamic business environment that's changing minute by minute and second by second? That's the challenge. But the problem is the way audit has approached this in the past is like Hercules battling the Hydra. Hercules had many battles to fight. One was against the multi-headed dragon, the Hydra. And you cut off one of its heads and multiple heads grows up in its place. That's the challenge of audit today, what I call the inevitability of failure. Managing audits and work papers and tasks and documents, spreadsheets, and emails. Things get slipped and we miss things. And there's a lack of proper evidence, and regulators and the external auditors are coming in and they want to see a complete system of record and audit trail. What was audited on what date and time? What were the findings? Managing this in documents, spreadsheets, and emails don't stand up in court. I can manufacture audit evidence in a word processing document or a spreadsheet to get by that regulator and paint a rosy picture for the organization when it really is in trouble. And regulators and external auditors are catching up on this and saying, we want a complete system of record. What was audited on what date and time? What were the findings? If somebody came back and modified something, date, timestamp, who modified that? And documents, spreadsheets, emails don't get you there. And organizations are looking for that agile approach to managing audits with technology that have that system of record and audit trail that provide integrity to the business. That's where we need to go. And that's what we're looking at. The organization needs to be able to see the tree as well as the forest. That individual audit that was done, the interconnectedness of audits and risks across audits, and to be able to see the impact of not just financial audits, but also IT audits and operational audits and see the big picture. Now, I've been challenged on this slide a few times. I've been challenged that, the tree and the forest is a great analogy, but in our reality, in an audit, we got to get down to the leaf on the branch and the branches that connects to the tree. It's not just the tree and the forest, but it's the details. End user computing controls, like in spreadsheets and the modification of a spreadsheet value and the adaptation of one spreadsheet model for another financial model in the organization, and it hadn't been validated and tested. The details of the leaves in the branch are critically important to the audit. It's not just the tree and the forest, but it's also the leaves and the branch on the tree that audit's got to be able to validate as it tries to navigate chaos in today's organization. So the current state of legacy audits and control assessments ends up in, the Dante's Inferno on the left, with wasted resources and inefficiencies and things slipping through cracks, and lack of visibility across different audits, and everything's being managed, like as you see on the right, in documents and spreadsheets and emails, and there's lack of collaboration between different audits and be able to see the interconnectedness of operational audits and financial audits and IT audits with limited visibility and reporting. Organizations need to overcome that to what we have as the future of audit, where we have a continuous audit readiness that is driven by agile technology, agile audit technology that can help the organization stay current in its audits and see these interconnections of different operational audits and financial audits and IT audits in the big perspective to drive performance-driven control processes that align with the organization. That audit is continuously being able to help the organization navigate chaos and provide assurance on that dynamic and distributed business environment that we operate in today, whether we're the small organization or the global behemoth, that we can provide an agile approach to audit management in 2020. This is what I call federated audit management, that allows auditors to provide greater assurance of properly designed and operated controls and insight into business performance through consistent and reconcilable reports from operational and field audits. A federated model strives to provide greater visibility into emerging risks by enhancing communication between auditors and the business unit executives in this area. It means that we have to have a top-down approach to audit strategy for 2020. What is our audit management strategy overall? How do we align and integrate and understand the range of traditional internal audits over financial reporting, IT audits, operational audits, third-party vendor, supplier, outsourcer, service provider type audits. How do we build that strategy, that overall audit plan? And then how do we execute on that in the audit management processes and make those processes more efficient, effective, and agile? Because audit's being tasked to do more and isn't necessarily being given more resources to do it. It's not like we're increasing audit staff at a significant level, but at the same time, audits being tasked with a broader range of operational audits to conduct. That means we need information technology that makes those audit management processes more efficient, effective, and agile, so our current audit staff can get more done that's being asked of them in that time frame. So that brings us to the bottom line of technology. How technology enables efficient, effective, and agile audit management. This is not your father's audit management program anymore. Audit management today in today's dynamic business is different from what internal audit looked like 20 years ago. Audit today is different, and today's audit department has growing demands to do more audits across operations and third-party relationships while still being constrained by limited resources to fulfill these demands. Effectively conducting audits, efficiently managing limited audit resources, and meeting the agility demands required of a dynamic business environment requires a top-down approach to audit that is driven by risk-based priorities. Technology is utilized to manage resources, analyze data, and streamline audit operations. It means that we have to have efficient, effective, and agile audit management, that we can have this integrated information architecture that enables audit management, planning and performance, managing the work papers and details and the overall entity, where we can analyze and act on findings, monitor the progress of audits and what stage they're at, and be able to report on this throughout the environment, and be able to see the complete audit management universe, life cycle and projects, the audit resources of staff and timing, and the execution of audits across the organization, whether they're financial audits, IT audits, or the range of operational audits that the organization is conducting. It means that we have to have an information architecture that can take in distributed and disconnected data, audit data points, integrate and map those together to provide context, analyze and understand these relationships, and build out action items into the audit findings of the organization so the organization can take action. That we have technology that delivers strong management reporting. One organization I was talking to is spending 200 employee hours to build a report for the board of directors. It now takes them less than a minute. Well, what does it take to build out those audit reports, just for an individual audit, but across audits as well? And to provide the overall audit reports. How much time is it taking to manage all those documents, spreadsheets, and emails, and navigate and mine those for data to build those reports? Is it taking you 200 employee hours? I know one organization it was. Now it takes them less than a minute. What's that audit trail? And being able to provide that documented evidence of what was audited and what date and time, if somebody modified something, having that date and time stamp. Being able to provide the workflow and tasks to make sure things aren't slipping through cracks. To provide that platform of collaboration between the audit staff and the business and the response to the audits and the audit findings. And to be able to document things like exceptions and deviations to controls and things in the environment. All this is critical, and technology delivers this today. Agile audit technology today is highly usable. It's good, for the back office of audit management, that third line of defense, but also how they interact with the first and second lines of defense. It's highly usable for all people that are involved in audits, from the auditors themselves to the people that have to respond to the audit findings and provide attestations and things. It's highly usable and engaging and a modern user experience. Agile audit software shouldn't cost a lot to own. It shouldn't take 2 years to roll out and build out in the organization. That's old software. Today's software is highly agile with a lower total cost of ownership. That's configurable and adaptable to your organization, scalable, can integrate with other systems and provide the right analytics and intelligence to drive your audit program forward into the future. The benefits of a 360-degree contextual awareness of audit, when you have an agile audit management strategy and process that is enabled through information and technology, is what I call agile audit. It makes us more aware, more aware of the interconnectedness of audits and controls in the environments and how different operational audits can intersect with finance and IT audits, and be able to see these interconnections. Because risk is interconnected, just like that Titanic example that I referenced in the beginning of my presentation. This allows us to align and provide for strategic audit planning, be responsive to a dynamic and changing business environment where regulations, business, and risks are changing. And we might have our cyclical audits, but the change in the risk profile might drive an audit to start between the periodic cyclical audits and things, and drive a risk-based approach to audits because we're more responsive to changes in the risk environment, which makes us more agile and nimble and resilient, and hopefully at the end of the day, more efficient. We're getting more done with the resources we have, because most of the audit departments I'm talking to aren't getting more staff, but they're being asked to do more. And so how does it make us more efficient? So that's my segue into this. Now I'd like to turn this over to David Diamond to provide his perspective on audit management.
Thank you, Michael. I definitely appreciate that. And welcome to everybody. Hope everybody is having a great day. And I really think that Michael has hit on some amazing, amazing points and some very significant issues that we'll be talking about. I do want to go through and talk about all these points here. And let me just get caught up here real quick. And so how do we go back and think about back to the basics, and how do we become successful? Well, we all know as auditors, and a lot of you on the line now are auditors, you know, look, it's the basic task. We're all these, you know, that drive the initiatives. We evaluate the company risk management procedures, and that's really been key for me in my development as a, you know, a former head of audit, where I would go to management and I'd make sure that I understood what their risks were, what their objectives for the company was, whether it be financial, operational, regulatory. It really, I tried to incorporate everything. And that's exactly what we're trying to do and what we're being asked to do, as Michael mentioned. You know, we need to make sure that we protect against the fraud and the theft of the company. And we have to perform all of these reviews and tests, and then we have to report on it. We have to identify the effectiveness of all of these processes. And as Michael mentioned, there is just a ton of chaos out there, more than ever before. You know, I've been in the field for over 20 years, and it just seems like, you know, when we had to study in class in history, it just is becoming more and more and more. We have to deal with all the legal ramifications. Now the IT security is being increased on a daily basis. The laws, the financial standards, all the regulatory changes, not to mention all the market changes in the environment. And as Michael mentioned, these just keep going day in and day out. And here we are, internal audit, responsible for all of these areas to give assurance that these 3 points that I'm bringing up are being handled appropriately by the company. We're lucky, you know, because as Michael mentioned, we're not getting the resources really to adequately staff and to be able to handle all of this that's going through. And so we're lucky that really not more is falling through the cracks. We really do rely on all these other different departments and areas to take care of these issues. But at the end of the day, we're the ones, the audit department, that's being asked to provide the assurance to the audit committee that everything is going well. So we have a huge task, we really do, to be able to address all of this and handle all of these, the chaos that Michael's mentioned, and navigate through this process. So audit departments are constantly being asked to keep reviewing all these areas. That's not changing, and it's not going to change, right? So what do we need to do? How do we accomplish all of these tasks successfully, right? And as Michael mentioned, and as you'll hear from Robbie, we need an organized and dependable and repeatable process. We can't worry about how we're going to handle all this chaos and how we're going to navigate through this. But yet, many departments, and you know this to be true, we're still using Excel, we're still using Word, we're still using email back and forth, working with the process owners after we've developed this extensive audit program to try to cover all of these issues and the chaos that's going through. Here we are using simple Excel and Word files being passed. And as you know, and as we all know, we are constantly having been bombarded with different process owners. Hey, did this Excel worksheet, did you get it? Oh, I thought we worked off of this last one. Wait, did that change? Oh, we didn't change it. I thought we did. And on and on and on. This is not the way to work. And now we are being asked to take on more and more. So what's happening? Right now, the trend is that different departments have been looking to technology and new SaaS tools and software packages to go ahead and try to help us become more agile. As Michael mentioned, we need a system to do this. And we've seen this now. The time has come. The industry has, the IT industry right now has finally been able to provide cloud-based processes that replace these old, larger systems that are not cloud-based, that are expensive. And as Michael mentioned, it takes months and sometimes years to really get the process going. We can't deal with that anymore. So as you can hear and see and read about, all these new audit departments, or I shouldn't say new, but the departments, audit departments are going to the new software tools, and that's proving to be effective to be able to manage and provide the assurance that we ultimately need to provide. It's crazy that we're being asked to do all this with the resources that we're given, and we're constantly being pushed down. And so, as I really want to say, this is very important. This is a turning point for internal audit and other areas to help us. It's similar to SOX requirements, where now it's getting attention worldwide, where as an industry, we really need to unite and be able to provide support that we now have a system, a software system that we need, and every department is going to be needing to be able to take control of all the chaos and be able to provide assurance. Now, this webinar is not meant to tell you necessarily how to do it. It's being able to address and acknowledge the fact that audit's time has come now, where we need to be able to market to all the CEOs and the CFOs and the audit committees that we report to. We need to be able to let them know and make sure that we are starting to hear back from them that we finally are being acknowledged that we have a huge undertaking. We need the software that is out there now. There's no question. For example, you don't hear anybody questioning a CFO that they need a financial system, SAP, Oracle, etc. They're not going to say, well, listen, we, keep working on that Excel worksheet and we'll just have to deal with it. No, that's not, you just don't hear that. And you won't hear that. And that's what we need to do right now for the audit industry. We need to be able to know that whether you have one or two folks in the audit department or 300, that you need an audit software package. And right now, as we know, it's out there and it can take care of what we need. And it takes care of the resources that our audit staff, it's going to be taking care of all of the different process owners. And when I say take care of, it'll identify who are our process owners, who are our external auditors that we're working with. Every one of them are going to be in this system now, being able to see one truth of the process, because we as auditors will put in all of our risk controls and all of our narratives and all of our workflows and all of our flow charts of the process that we have spent hours working with the process owners, identifying what the risks are, identifying what the attributes of how they're being tested, and then how we as auditors test those areas and how we communicate to the different process owners and management and the audit committee that we give them assurance that everything is fine now, we've tested, or if we have issues that we're addressing these issues, how we mitigate these issues. And that's just on a SOX level. As Michael mentioned, we have all the different other areas that we have to cover operationally, regulatorily, IT-wise. We handle it all. And so how do we keep track of all that? It's an enormous, enormous undertaking that I think has been long overdue that we need a process. So we now have an agile process, and Robbie will be talking more about it. But what I was thinking about is, how do I, as a head of audit, how do I present this to the world, to the CFOs, to the CEOs, to the audit committees, so that there is no question we need the support? Well, first off and formally, we have now this cloud-based software, which again works with the environment that we're in. People nowadays are working from home. They're not as commuting as much, or it's a global world out there. We no longer cannot just drive into work and work off of our computers. So cloud-based, we can work wherever we're at, wherever we need to deal with our everyday life that commingles with our work life, taking kids to school, if somebody's sick, or just being in a different location, going from New York to California. So number one, we need to be able to identify that the cloud-based type of audit systems are mandatory. And the other aspect is, because of the new software that's out there, it's much less expensive than the hundreds and thousands of dollars that we used to pay to incorporate these big teammate type processes and these large systems. Now we get a much, much higher return on investment, which speaks to the CFO and pretty much everybody else. So I think we need to make sure that that's understood. There's no question that that is what's going on right there. Second, we need to educate not only on the savings, right, but we need to be able to make sure that we market to our customers, which is our CEOs, the CFO, the process owners, the audit committee, that the software that we need handles all the processes, everything, from enterprise risk management and identifying the risks, as I started out, where you're going to be sitting down, as we always traditionally have with management early on, to develop the annual audit plan, to be able to understand where they're coming from, what the process owners need. We incorporate all of our old findings and the environment and the objectives of the company. We develop our audit plan, and then we need to take an inventory of all of our resources that we need, that we will be utilizing. And as Michael mentioned, a key point that I was glad he brought up, and that is, you can't just bring an auditor and throw them at an issue that they may not have had, or test an issue or be a part of the audit program to address that they have not been exposed to. So we need training. We need a software system that also tracks who has the proper training. I, as the head of audit, need to know what are the strengths of my staff and how do I where do I go to give them the training to supplement them, to support them, so that when I do have an issue and I need some bench strength, I can bring them on. I can train them behind the scenes, and then when they're ready, I can provide them out, put them out there. So that's really important, as Michael mentioned, that we need to have the right resources, and yet we're not given the budget to have all the perfect people out there, but yet we need to do that. Can you imagine if you went to a doctor and you said to the doctor, hey, I have this problem, and they go, well, I haven't really worked on this before, but I am a doctor, so I'll give it a shot. Just because you're an auditor doesn't mean that you have, the ability to do what you need to do. So in wrapping it up, we just need to make sure that we market properly. And remember that the audit committee is leaving it up to management to purchase and make these decisions on the software, right? So we just need to make sure that we constantly manage. So right now, I want to go ahead and give it back to Ravi. And Ravi's going to be telling us a little bit more about it. Ravi's the founder and CEO of Audit Prodigy, a SaaS audit performance management solutions company. It's, in my opinion, Audit Prodigy is one of the most versatile and at the same time the easiest to use software. And Ravi, take it away.
All right, David. Thank you very much. Great presentations, both of you. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay, so thank you very much. So great presentations, great comments about the environment we operate in, the complexity we live in, the constraints we live in. But let me introduce myself. I spent about 30 years in finance and audit space. My last 3 jobs have been as a CAE. But more than half my career has been spent in finance and operations and IT. So I come at this whole thing in a slightly different way, as you would expect, with someone with a slightly different background. And I can tell you this, from a CFO perspective, and I used to be one couple of companies, there are 2 things that companies are looking at, audit to provide. And this is the data that you have from KPMG, a pretty large survey. And the reality check is we fall short. Okay, I mean, to me, I find this, the 85% neither agree nor disagree response is quite shocking if you really look at it. Do companies agree that the IA function adequately identifies and responds to the emerging risks? So virtually everybody's saying they agree or they neither agree or disagree. What does it say about us? I know that is something that's always been a challenge in terms of how do you communicate the audit value to the broader organization, right? I mean, we have the old stereotype of auditors being someone who comes after the battle and bayonets the wounded. Some of those perceptions continue to be there, and auditors are constantly battling that. But how do you drive a collaborative culture in a very chaotic environment, as Michael has described, right? So this is something I always keep in front of me just to get myself a reality check of what the world thinks of us, as opposed to what we think of ourselves, right? So we went ahead and identified, based on our years of experience, where do we fail? What are our failure points before we decided to talk about any solution or building any solution? We said to ourselves, let's go and talk about where do we fail or where do we fall short. This is what we have, the world we live in. There's just too much complexity. And as Michael said, the world is driving a lot of this complexity. But some of this complexity is something we drive ourselves because of the way we do things in terms of manual processes and other ways. Poor visibility, again, with the world changing as Michael has talked about extensively, I mean, how well do we understand what's really going on? Not just outside the department, but even within the department. Low productivity. I mean, this is always the hard area when you're talking to the CFO for funding and budgets every year, right? So what do these things mean? Complexity, our processes, are they simple enough or not? What does complexity drive? It requires a lot of maintenance, it costs a lot of money, and people become indispensable. I used to have this guy who used to build all my macros in my spreadsheet, and one fine day he quit, and nobody in the department knew, and this was 1 week before the audit committee meeting, how all those reports worked. So that person became an absolute indispensable person. What does poor visibility mean? It literally means weak collaboration, which means we live in our own world, we do what we do, but we don't really understand what is going on in the rest of the organization. And we are pretty slow in how we respond to risks that we even once we come to know about it. Accountability, even this is not always very clear. So we can dig into that deeper later. And this is the ultimate discussion you always have with the CFO when you're going for the budget discussion, right? They want us to do more and more and more, and we have the same resources. And David brought this out, right? We have the same team, and some of our best people are frustrated, and some of them have already left. So all of this creates uncertainty and inflexibility. Our ability to accept new projects and deliver them on time is compromised because our productivity is not really that high, right? So these are the things that we believe we need to focus on to avoid to be more successful in dealing with this chaotic environment, right? So are we really rolling dice on a day-to-day basis? Okay, and how much unpredictability are we dealing with? Unpredictability in execution, unpredictability in how we plan because we cannot respond to changing circumstances. And we barely, a lot of times, get there by year end, by the skin of our teeth. So is this the way it should be? Or is there a better way? I mean, that is the question, right? That is what we're trying to get to. And my belief is, and our belief, really what drives our success, in spite of all these changing circumstances and all the world changing, comes down to the basics. There are fundamentally two things we do in the way we see it. There's the technical work, the reality of work papers and actual audit, professional standards, and all that work we do. But in what we think is that's the easier part. The hard part is perception. How do we collaborate with the rest of the organization? How can we be seen as true partners, right? So what does actual technical work mean? We all know this, the quality of the work you provide, so you get high reliance as well as acceptability, timeliness of your work, and productivity. I mean, these are the fundamentals. This is the basic cake before you can talk about collaboration and everything else. So what do we mean by perception management or collaboration? Well, there is within the team, the collaboration that is required with the stakeholders, all the people who depend on us or who we interact with. And then how aware are we about the world that's changing around us rapidly? This is how we see us being successful, in managing reality and perception, okay? So if we break it down, each one of them, in terms of quality, the opportunity for standardization, is not always taken advantage of. Do we have standard templates? Do we have standard automated workflows? Do we have standard automated reporting? And Michael talked about, a reporting that took 200 hours. Is that what we should be doing? Standardized managerial reviews and standardized quality feedback. I mean, do we have our processes? How standardized are our processes? Timeliness. Now, I was presenting at some seminars, some 200 people there, and I asked them, what's the most important thing we have? And they said, oh, the team, our resources. I said, great. So how many of you know how long on average an audit takes, or how long this control took to test last year versus this year? Very few people knew. How long on average an planning takes within your audit? Very few people knew. So again, here we are talking about our most valuable resource, which is our people, but we do not really track or understand at a level of detail that is necessary to truly understand exactly the work that goes on. So the planning, scheduling, and reporting, those aspects are still, in very large companies we deal with, are done manually through spreadsheets. And that creates enormous amount of frustration and difficulties and inefficiencies. Again, talking about inefficiencies, productivity. we talk about, managing activity versus managing results, right? What's the difference? The difference is how good is your planning? Well, how does good plan happen? It happens based on detailed understanding of what happened in the past, last year. How well do we understand how we executed what we executed last year? At what level of detail do we understand that? And a lot of times we just plan based on last year's plan because we really don't know what happened actually last year. So those are the sorts of things we talk about in productivity. Collaboration, right? I've seen this happen over and over again within the team where schedules change. People are not informed on time, or if they're informed, they're informed, accurately. Do we know who is available when? Do we know when a particular phase is complete? Do we know what are the automatic, workflows within the system that guarantee that certain reviews take place? How do we measure performance of our team members and managers? Do we do that? How well do we do that? Now, when you talk about the stakeholders, in a spreadsheet and email-based world, it's amazing. I've seen $20 billion companies still use nothing more than spreadsheets and emails for things as big as risk assessments and even for planning and remediation. One of the knocks against us as auditors is that management does not see us as part of the team. Well, there are things that is true, and that's a constant battle to be seen as really a true partner within the organization. But we also create blocks ourselves. The walls that we create around us do not allow management to come in and, for example, work with us on remediation. We write a report, they give us a date when they're going to remediate it, and we wait until 3 months to find out if they did it or not. Where is the collaboration between us and them? And how do we do that? It's all done a lot of times manually through spreadsheets, emails, phone calls. Is there a better way to do it, right? So that's what I mean by collaboration with stakeholders, and not just in issue remediation, but in many areas. Reporting, for example, right? When we issue a report, do we actually give credit for the work that is done before the completion of the project? So those are the sorts of things we can do to improve collaboration with stakeholders. Now, awareness, right? Michael talked about the changing environment and the rapidly changing environment we're living in. Now, when you talk about risk assessments, I'm yet to see a company that does risk assessments on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis, say at least once a quarter. Or even if they do, it's kind of a rehash of what they did at the beginning of the year. So do we have systems and processes that allow us to really keep in touch with the changing risks in the organization on a very ongoing basis? Now, the only way you can do that on a more frequent basis is if the process is efficient and stakeholders believe that it's an easy process that they can follow, right? If you just keep sending them the same long spreadsheet to respond to, eventually that is not going to work because it's inefficient from your perspective as well as from their perspective. So if you make the process simple and easy and visible, you make the entire process more effective. So again, those are the sorts of awarenesses that we can help develop. So ultimately, this is what a CFO wants. As a CFO, I want predictable results. I don't want surprises, and I want an inclusive performance. I don't want you to be a lone ranger and go and do whatever you do. I want the rest of the team to feel comfortable with what you're doing. In fact, one of the CFOs, I took up a brand new CAE job and I asked him, so what are your expectations from me? Do you have any metrics? What do you want me to deliver by the end of the year? His answer was, by the end of this year, I want the external auditors to be happy with the quality of your work and the rest of the team happy with you and your people. So inclusive performance is something I've learned the hard way at that company. It's not enough to just do a good job on the technical side. It's equally important to be seen as a collaborative, inclusive partner. So that is our mandate and that is our expectation, right? So, and that is what I believe are the fundamentals of how you succeed as an auditor. So we, having spent all these decades in audit and being a CFO and operations guy, we went and built this software. So for the next 2 minutes, I'll talk about our software, just so you get an idea of what we intended to do and what we built. One of my frustrations with all the big solutions used to be that, they're just too complex. They take too long for me to learn. It takes forever to implement. I don't have time or patience or budget to do any of those things. On the other hand, I went with spreadsheets, and I've used nothing but spreadsheets, and I ran into their own frustrations. So I felt like I was between a devil and the deep sea. On one hand, I have something very comprehensive, but very complex and expensive. On the other hand, I had spreadsheets which were not strong enough to carry me through the collaboration that I needed. So we went and built this software, our Prodigy, where we try to combine the best of both worlds. Okay, the ease of the spreadsheets with the bells and whistles that you would find in expensive, complex spreadsheets. What is the single most important thing to know about us? It is simplicity. One of the points that David made before is, we are constrained with our resources. We do not have time, budget, or resources to go and build something enormous. So we have to manage to do all these different things that David talked about with the same limited number of resources. How do we do that? We do that by keeping our process simple. And this is a pretty versatile tool set that we built, because we believe as an auditor, you shouldn't have to go through multiple tool sets to do what you need to do. And everything should be at your fingertips. So, and we believe that all these tools should be integrated. And of course, they need to be secure and private without going, and it needs to be simple. And it needs to be simple to implement, but even more important, simple to use on a day-to-day basis. So this is what we built, and we would be more than happy to talk to you more about it. So we not only talk about the pain points and the chaos and the environment, but we're also talking about a way in which we figured out how best to do and meet those challenges in a very simple and powerful way. Okay, with that, I would like to thank you for this presentation and for attending this presentation. And if you have any questions, we would be happy to answer. Michael, did you see any questions come through? If not, we will close this presentation at the moment with.
I do not see any at the moment.
Okay, cool. So that's awesome. Thanks. So if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to write to any one of us. We have the contact information here. And if you're interested in this presentation deck itself, please write to any one of us, and we'll be happy to send you this deck. You have our emails and our names and our addresses. So with that, we would like to thank you for taking the time this morning. And I'm glad that we can give you back 7 minutes of your time. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.